You there? Yes. You, with the coal. Take my box up and then find me somebody sensible, because I have been standing in this hall for 11 minutes and nobody has come, and I am beginning to suspect this house of being asleep. The Duke of Jervaulx, who had a hod of coal in one hand and a wet dog's collar in the other, considered several replies and chose the interesting one. "Yes, madam," he said. Afterward he was never able to explain it satisfactorily, even to himself. He had come in by the garden door because the pointer had rolled in the ha-ha, and he had not wanted her tracked through the front of the house. He was in shirt-sleeves and an old waistcoat, and had coal dust to the wrist, and a young woman in a soaked brown pelisse and a bonnet that had given up entirely was standing in the middle of his own hall with a corded box at her feet, addressing him with perfect confidence as a servant. Nobody in Jervaulx had addressed Roland Aubryn with perfect confidence in 7 years. They came at him sideways. They spoke to his left shoulder. His own steward had developed a way of announcing bad news while looking at the middle distance, as though the news were happening to somebody else in another county. So he picked up the box. "You will be the governess," he said, going up the stairs ahead of her. "I will be the governess if anybody can be found to tell me where the schoolroom is, and whether there is a fire in it, and what the child is called, since the letter I received was signed by a Mr. Halloway and contained a great deal about my salary and nothing whatever about her." She came up behind him, dripping. "Anwen Prowse, what is your name?" "Aubryn." "Well, Mr. Aubryn, you may consider yourself the only useful person in Cumberland. Is there a fire?" "There will be in 10 minutes." There was, because he built it himself, kneeling on the schoolroom hearth with the hod beside him, while she went round the room opening shutters that had been closed since the spring and reciting a list of everything wrong with it, which was accurate. No globe, no slates, 4 books of which 2 are sermons, ink dried in the well, a window that does not shut, and a mouse that has been at the copybooks. She stood in the middle of the floor with her hands on her hips. How long has she been without a governess? 11 months. And before that? 4 of them in 3 years, said Roland. The first left because the house was too quiet. The second left because the Duke was too silent. The third left because she was found reading his private letters, and the fourth because she made the mistake of telling the child that her mother was in heaven and would be watching to see whether she was good. Miss Prowse turned round. "That is a wicked thing to say to a child." "I thought so too." "Was she dismissed?" "Within the hour," he said, and set the kindling and did not look up. The child was called Cecily, and she was 7 years old, and she was standing in the doorway with her arms behind her back, looking at the new governess with the flat wariness of a small creature that has been handled by too many people. Roland saw Anwen Prowse take her in the good frock, the perfect hair, the shoes, all of it correct and paid for and cold, and he saw her make a decision. "Good afternoon," said Miss Prowse. "There is a mouse living in your copybooks, and I have decided we shall not evict him until we have found out where he sleeps, because I should like to draw him. Do you know anything about mice?" Cecily thought about it. "They like tallow," she said. "They do. That is the first sensible thing anybody has told me in this county, apart from Mr. Aubryn, who lit us a fire." She sat down on the fender. "What else do you know?" By supper they were on the floor with a candle end, a saucer of tallow scrapings, and the 4 books arranged as a wall. Roland stood in the passage outside for some minutes, out of the light, and listened to his daughter explain the habits of mice to a stranger in a voice he had not heard her use since she was 5. He did not correct the mistake that night. He told himself It was because the woman was tired. He did not correct it the following morning either, when she came down to the kitchen at 6:30 looking for a kettle, and found him there with his boots off, and said, "Mr. Aubryn, you are up before the maids. You must be very badly used," and made him tea with a familiarity that would have appalled his aunt. And he did not correct it on the Thursday, when she caught him crossing the stable yard, and asked him, as one asks the one person in a household who actually knows anything, whether the Duke would be likely to object to the schoolroom being moved to the old still-room, which had a south window and a door onto the kitchen garden. "He would not object," said Roland. "Are you certain? I am told he is a very cold man. Mrs. Doggett says he has not smiled since the Duchess died, which is 7 years, and that he goes about the place like weather." "Like weather," he repeated. Her phrase, not mine. It is a good phrase. She frowned up at the house. What is he actually like? The Duke of Jervaulx stood in his own stable yard in a coat he used for the dogs, and heard himself say, "Tired, mostly, and a good deal stupider than people suppose." "Everyone is," said Anwen Prowse comfortably. "It is the great consolation of my profession. Ask him about the still-room, will you? And ask him for 4 slates, a globe, a box of chalks, 6 copybooks, and a dozen candles, and tell him the candles are not for me, they are for the mouse, and he will think me mad, but the child will laugh, and she does not laugh, Mr. Aubryn, and it wants seeing too." He got the still-room ready himself, with 2 footmen sworn to a secrecy they found delightful, and had the slates and the globe up from Kelderby by Saturday. It went on for 19 days, and they were, without any competition whatever, the 19 best days of the past 7 years. He mended the schoolroom window because she asked Mr. Aubryn to. He carried the globe. He was consulted about the mouse, whose name was Tallow, and who had been drawn 11 times and had begun to come out for cheese in the afternoons. He was told, at length, over the kitchen table at 6:30 in the mornings, what was wrong with the education of girls in England, and he argued about it, and was told he was wrong, and enjoyed it so much that he lay awake afterward. And on the 9th day, standing in the doorway of the still-room, he heard his daughter laugh, a proper laugh, undignified, going on too long, because Miss Prowse had put the globe on her head and was walking about with it while reciting the rivers of Africa. He put his hand over his mouth. He was not quick enough. He caught, in the black window glass opposite, the reflection of a face he barely recognized, doing something with the corners of its mouth that it had not done since a wet March night 7 years before, and he turned and walked away down the corridor, and stood in the gun-room for 10 minutes with his hands flat on the table. The 19 days ended on a Tuesday, at 4 in the afternoon, when the Bishop of Kelderby came to dinner. Roland was in the hall in a black coat and a fresh cravat, having his hand shaken, when Miss Prowse came down the stairs behind him with a slate in her hand and said, "Mr. Aubryn, the chimney in the still-room is." And the Bishop of Kelderby, beaming, said, "Jervaulx, you never told me you had a wit in the schoolroom." The slate did not fall. She was not, he thought afterward with enormous admiration, a woman who dropped things. She simply stood on the 4th stair from the bottom and looked at him, and went perfectly white and said, "Oh." The dinner lasted 3 hours and 11 minutes, and Roland Aubryn was afterward unable to recall a single word the Bishop of Kelderby said, though he answered him throughout with such fluency that the man went away pleased. At 10:30, he went up to the still-room and found her packing the slates into a crate. "Miss Prowse." "Your Grace." She did not turn round. "I shall be gone by the 8 o'clock coach from Kelderby, and I shall not require the quarter's wages, as I have not earned them and have in any case insulted you in your own stable yard." You said I was tired, and a good deal stupider than people suppose. I said the Duke was cold and went about the place like weather, said Anwen Prowse. And I said it to the Duke, and I asked the Duke to fetch 4 slates and to be careful of the globe, and I have made him build fires and mend a window. And on Monday I told him he had a smut on his chin and wiped it off with my thumb. She set a slate down rather hard. I would like to be angry with you, and I find I have not got the standing for it, which is the most humiliating part of the entire affair. You have the standing, said Roland. Be angry. I deserve the whole of it, and I have come up here to be told so, which is a thing that does not happen to me any more, and which I have discovered I miss very much. She turned round then. Why did you not tell me? He had had 3 hours and 11 minutes to prepare an answer, and he found that none of the prepared ones would do. Because you handed me your box, he said. Because for 11 minutes in that hall you were the first person in 7 years who spoke to me as though I were a man in a room and not a condition of the weather. And because the moment I said the word Duke it would stop, and I knew it would stop, and I wanted one more day of it. And then I wanted another. I am aware that is not a defense. It is not. No. I told you things. Her voice cracked very slightly, and she took hold of it. I told you about my father's parish and the £9 a year, and how I came to be a governess at 19. I would not have said any of it to a duke. I know, I would not have heard any of it as a duke. He stayed in the doorway because he had the sense not to come further in. Miss Prowse, I am going to ask you to stay, and I am going to be honest about the terms, because I have had enough of arrangements made kindly over people's heads. My daughter laughed on the 9th day. I heard it from the passage. She has not laughed in this house since she was 5 years old, and I have paid 4 governesses and a great deal of money to a great many people, and none of them managed it, and you did it with a globe on your head. Anwen Prowse looked at the crate of slates. That is unfair, she said. It is entirely unfair. I have nothing else. He paused. I shall raise your salary to £60, which is what Mr. Halloway ought to have offered and did not. The still room is yours. If you wish never to speak to me again except across the schoolroom table, I shall abide by it and never mention this evening. But I would ask one thing, and it is the only thing I shall ask. Go on telling me when I am wrong. Nobody has done it for 7 years, and you have managed it 4 times in 19 days, and I am a worse man for the silence than I ever was for the grief. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You may keep the coal carrying. I beg your pardon. You lit the fire in that schoolroom on your knees, your grace, and you did it before you knew who I was and while I was scolding you, and it was the only warm thing in this house. She began, with great composure, to take the slates back out of the crate. A man who does that is not weather. I shall stay, and I shall go on telling you when you are wrong, which will be frequently, and you will not enjoy it as much as you presently imagine. He did enjoy it. That was the great surprise of the winter. He came to the still room at 11 every morning, at first with excuses, and then without them. He was set to hold the map while the rivers of Africa were recited, and to be the Roman Senate, and once, disastrously, to be a camel. He learned that his daughter could add 3 columns in her head, and had been quietly terrified of him for 2 years, because he never spoke at breakfast, and that this was mended not by any grand gesture, but by his sitting down at a table, with a boiled egg 114 mornings in a row. In February, his aunt came from Bath, took one look at the arrangement of the household, and said what she had come to say. You are making yourself ridiculous over a governess. Yes, said Roland. It is a considerable improvement on what I was making of myself before, which was nothing at all. Roland, The girl has 90 pounds and a dead curate for a father. She has 60 pounds because I pay it, and her father kept a parish of 400 souls on 9 pounds a year and a garden, and died of a fever he caught sitting up with a family nobody else would go near. He put down his cup. Aunt Honoria, in 7 years you have written me a great many letters about my duty. Not one of them mentioned Cecily. Miss Prowse mentioned her in the first 11 minutes before she knew who I was, when there was nothing to be got by it. His aunt left on the Friday. She wrote in April, however, to ask what the child was learning, which he took as a treaty. He asked Anwen Prowse in May, in the kitchen garden, at 6:30 in the morning, because that was where and when he had first been happy, and he was not a man of great imagination. I have 3 things to say, and I have rehearsed them, and I shall very likely say them in the wrong order, said Roland. The first is that if you refuse me, you keep the still room, the 60 pounds, and the post for as long as you want it, and I shall not raise the subject again, and you have my word, and my word is the one thing about me that has never once been in question. That is a very unromantic beginning. I am aware. The second is that I have been in love with you since the 9th day, and possibly since the 11 minutes in the hall, and certainly since you told me I had a smut on my chin. And the third, he stopped, and started again. The third is that Cecily asked me last week whether people who are dead can see us, and I was able to answer her, and I was able to answer her because you have spent 7 months making this a house where a question may be asked out loud. That is not gratitude. Gratitude is a thing I could pay. This is something else, and I have no way of paying it, and I should like to spend a great many years attempting it. Anwen Prowse stood among the pea sticks with a watering can in her hand. You understand what will be said, she said. The Duke of Jervaulx and the governess. It will be in every drawing room between here and Carlisle. It will be in every drawing room between here and Carlisle for 1 season, said Roland. And then it will be in this house for the rest of our lives, and I know which of the 2 I mean to live in. She put the watering can down. Then yes, she said. But you shall have to smile at the wedding, and I warn you now, Roland Aubryn, I have seen you do it exactly twice, and both times you turned round and walked into the gun room, and if you attempt it in front of a bishop, I shall never let you forget it. He smiled at the wedding. It is a matter of record. There were 140 witnesses, and the Bishop of Kelderby preached about it afterward at unnecessary length. His daughter, who was permitted to carry the flowers and to hold the ring, informed the congregation loudly in the middle of the service that there was a mouse called Tallow at home, who had been left a dish of cheese in honor of the occasion. And the Duke of Jervaulx laughed out loud in his own parish church, which several elderly persons present had been given to understand was impossible. There is a slate hanging in a frame in the still room at Jervaulx. It is cracked across one corner, and on it, in a child's hand, are the rivers of Africa, and underneath, in a governess's neat one, 60 pounds a year, 1 globe, 1 mouse, and a man who lit the fire himself.